Good. Thank you so much for FP&L, that great presentation, already getting you started and with a lot of good resources. And first off, I want to thank everybody for coming back. I know we had to cancel at the last minute 3 weeks ago. What happened was, it was right before my 11 o'clock newscast, and Elizabeth, my wife, called me, and she never calls me. So I knew something was up, and she says, my water broke. And I still had to do my 11 o'clock newscast. So I had to try to keep it together, and thankfully I did. Hauled it home. We got to the hospital at 1, and James, our new little baby boy, was born at 9 a.m. So I just want to say thank you for those that came out. I apologize if nothing I could do. So thank you for coming, and especially FPL, you guys came as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the past to better predict for the future. And last year, as we know, very active season in terms of what we had here in the state of Florida. Now, what was interesting was during the month of June and July, it was fairly quiet. And then one after another, we had 3 storm surge events, and it picked up quickly. So let's get right into it. Since 2017, we have been through what's called a hyperactive stretch, one after another. Major hurricanes across the Gulf, from Texas all the way towards Florida. I always joke that this is one of the more controversial graphics. Yeah, I know it says 4 is Ian. Some people get upset. They're like, I swear it was a Category 5 at landfall. It was a Category 5 during its strongest point. And, you know, it's not always about the number. And, you know, for example, Ian didn't technically make landfall as an upper 4 in terms of wind speed at landfall, but the strongest part of a hurricane is the eye wall. And when that eye wall was pushing on shore, it was a 5. And also, Ian had Category 5 storm surge as it pushed on shore. So again, it's more of a technicality that it was an upper 4, but you can see that it has been a heck of a stretch. And last year, we added Helene, there it is in the Big Bend, as a 4, and then Milton, Siesta Key, as a Category 3. Now, I can attest to this. So what if I told you that, so we have a tide sensor, analyzes water levels in Fort Myers, and it's been doing that since 1965. What if I told you that the 3 highest water levels over the past 60 years have been in the past 3 years? It's amazing. Years ago, I wouldn't say joking, but I think a lot of our viewers didn't have a respect for what storm surge can truly do, because we really did not have a lot of storm surge events. Well, Helene, Milton, Ian, they changed that. Now, these are not storm surge levels, these are water levels, and there's a difference there. You have to factor in high tide, low tide, so on and so forth. But you will also notice on this list, there's Irma, there's Idalia, that was 2 years ago. There's Debbie, that was the storm before Helene and Milton. So it's amazing how just in the past few years, storm surge has been such a big dynamic. And I have to say though that it's great to see that our locals have done a 180 on how they treat storm surge and what it can do. It can change lives in hours, minutes, if not seconds. For a show of hands, who here is your first hurricane season? That's okay, where are you coming from? Wisconsin, anybody else? Shout it out, where are you from?
St. Louis.
Okay, what about you? All right, so we have a lot of people who either from the north or they're from spots where, let's say you hit October, and that's when you're thinking of fall foliage, pumpkin spice everything. Well, in the state of Florida, we still have hurricane season very much in full swing. And that's when we had Milton last year, and then approaching October, in late September, we had Ian, confirmed as our worst natural disaster in at least 200 years. Could have been even longer. That's the data that we have, at least 200. So to do a recap, locally it was our #1 deadliest, #1 costliest, #1 greatest rainfall, 27 inches of rain, Grove City. #1 highest storm surge, 15 feet, Fort Myers Beach, and highest sustained winds. So there are going to be parts of this PowerPoint where I'm going to stop and say that this is something to really keep in mind, and this is one of those graphics. So this is Hurricane Ian storm surge, and what this drives home, and it's so critical, is how every mile makes all the difference for what you see or what you don't see. So for example, take a look at Boca Grande. Blue dot right there. They were north of the eye. They had a surge during Ian of 1 to 3 feet. You go 20 miles south, look at the red and even the pink. That is a surge of 9 to even as much as 15 feet. 20 miles was the difference between little to no surge and life-threatening surge. So what the National Hurricane Center will oftentimes do, and the wind weather team relays it, is that they're going to give you a storm surge map. But oftentimes, that storm surge map may cover a larger area than what actually occurs. Because they need to plan on the possibility, does a hurricane shift more north, does it shift more south? They need to account for that. So there was a time, I always bring this example up, where Punta Gorda in most of Charlotte County was in that 12 to 18 foot storm surge forecast with Ian. They didn't see anywhere close to that, and it was because Ian continued to shift south, and it took that worst surge towards Fort Myers Beach. Here's the reason why Charlotte County did not see much surge during Ian. All has to do with wind direction. In the northern hemisphere, our hurricanes, they rotate counterclockwise, so that wind was coming in from the land, and in many cases, it sucked out the water. On the southern side of the eye, you have 150 miles an hour of wind forcing up the water. Rotation comes in from the Gulf, so Sanibel, Fort Myers Beach, and Bonita, that is why they had the worst surge. We had a very similar situation play out with Milton last year, and we're going to talk about that coming up. So here's what creates more surge. So in red, that's what we don't want. A bigger storm, a stronger storm, a slower storm, the curvature of our coastline, the angle of approach, the continental shelf, we'll talk about that in a second, the lunar phase, does it make landfall during a full moon, a new moon, and just our overall daily tides. Now, if you have a checklist and a hurricane checks off most, if not all of this, you are going to have a big surge event. So here's a look at the continental shelf factor. You go 30 miles offshore of Miami, it gets deep, and it gets deep real fast. You go 30 miles off of our coast, and it's relatively shallow at 100 feet deep. Now, the reason why I bring that up is it is easier for Mother Nature to push water up along our coast. And when we moved into Babcock Ranch, and I'm at Trails Edge, just down the street, when we were moving, you might have put your boxes on a dolly, and then you move the dolly. Well, is it easier to do that with a gentle slope or a steep slope going up a hill? Obviously gentle. So it is easier for Mother Nature to push water up from the Gulf compared to the Atlantic. So translation, we are more susceptible to surge as a result. One of the things at Wink that I took out the year after Ian, I don't like the center line of the cone, so I hope by doing that we look at the cone in its entirety. The reason why I did that was 3 days before landfall, that center line was pointed to the Big Bend. It actually made landfall near that yellow star, and impacts are felt well outside of the cone. It's not like a hurricane just says, all right, I'm going to stay within this cone, and that's it. No, and in fact, you see that star over Collier County, Naples was out of the cone. They had 8 feet of surge and wind gusts over 100 miles an hour. So impacts absolutely are felt outside of the cone. This was last year. It's like someone took a ball of spaghetti and just went and threw it on the screen. We had 18 storms, 11 hurricanes, 5 major, defined as category 3 and above. And collectively, it was the 3rd costliest Atlantic hurricane season on record. $132 billion from what I call the big three, Beryl, Helene, and Milton, and no surprise, those were the three that were retired. So adjusted for 2025 inflation, here's a look at the other seasons and how they stack up. 2017, that was the year of Harvey in Texas, Irma in Southwest Florida, and Maria in Puerto Rico. That is to this day the most costliest, most damaging hurricane season. So here's one of those moments we're gonna stop and talk about the importance, and Helene really drove home that it's not always about where it makes landfall. Helene, the most devastating part of this storm, was not here, it was in the Carolinas. So what happened was it was just a worst case scenario for them where it quickly pushed inland after landfall. It was moving at like 28 miles an hour. So when a storm moves inland faster, it can possess still that strong wind. If you were here during Charlie in 2004, that was a very similar example where when a hurricane moves faster, it can bring that strongest wind more inland than a slower storm. So that's what Helene did. Had hurricane force wind deep into the Carolinas. Then it slowed down and freshwater flooding was a big dynamic. So as a result, 249 known deaths from Helene, damaged 80 billion. And the thing with Helene was it was a huge storm, bigger than Ian, bigger than a lot of other notable storms. I would say it's probably about the same size as Irma. The wind field in yellow, 450 miles wide from top to bottom. Here's a look at the satellite imagery as it approached. The red is hurricane force wind, the white is major hurricane force wind of about 110, 115 and above. And interestingly enough, guys, because of that huge wind field, that's why although it was all the way over here for the eye, we had surge of 4 to 7 feet, even though it was way the heck offshore, and it had to do with that large wind field. Here's a look at the deaths by state. North Carolina, not where it made landfall, 106, because of 31 inches of rain that fell. Compare that to 14 inches in Florida. So essentially, freshwater flooding was the biggest killer with Helene. Now, if you think about Ian, our biggest killer was saltwater flooding and surge. With Helene, it was freshwater flooding. One of the biggest misconceptions with hurricanes, people always focus on the wind. It's water. Whether it's freshwater or saltwater, that's the biggest killer. And that's why we really drive home evacuations, because of that fact. Okay, when we look at this graphic, I want you to look at this number right here. Only 1% of the Helene fatalities were from tornadoes. Keep that in mind when I show you our next hurricane. Milton, my goodness, what a storm. This hit the Gulf and exploded as it reached 180 miles an hour, pressure of 895 on a beautiful day like today. Oftentimes our pressure in millibars is about 10, 13. That sucker was 895. Very powerful storm. The damage 34 billion, deaths 45. I hate to say that it was weaker towards its landfall, but it was 115, pressure of 958. But this thing strengthened so quickly, I had people thought that it was manufactured, and that wasn't the case. It was just a situation of water temperatures in the 90s, no shear, and boom, this thing rapidly intensified. There's a look at the storm. Actually, the hurricane hunters, when they were flying into Milton with that 4-mile wide eye, it was so tiny that the hurricane hunters were only in it for 30 seconds, and then they flew out. Incredibly small eye. Here is a look at Milton on its approach. Again, as a reference, the red is hurricane force wind, the white is major hurricane force wind. Okay, so let's circle back to what we talked about, how every mile makes the difference. And if you guys were here during Milton, we remember the coverage about Tampa Bay. Remember, they were supposed to see big surge, 10, 12 feet, catastrophic. They only had a foot. But wow, you talk about tightroping it. If Milton went 20 miles north, it would have been catastrophic to Tampa Bay. Every mile makes all the difference. Minnesota Key, unfortunately, they had the worst surge. 10 feet was recorded, and in fact, at 10 feet, you're looking at the all-time highest surge in Southwest Florida history. So 15 feet from Ian, I had to go to the library for number 2, that was 1873, 13 feet. There's Donna at 12, there's Milton at 10. So it was a very impactful storm. Who recalls the tornado outbreak during Milton? Oh my goodness. You all experienced the worst tornado outbreak in Southwest Florida history, since at least we have tornado data from 1950. So since at least 1950, that was our worst outbreak. In the wind viewing area, including Highlands County, we had 19 tornadoes, 46 in total, and for the first time in Southwest Florida history, see that red line on the left side of Lake Okeechobee? That was an EF3. We've never had a 3 before Milton. So that was our first one. Devastated a community in Lakeport. The National Weather Service, they issued, I think, 128 tornado warnings. It felt like it on TV, where it was like one after another, and that was a state record for tornado warnings. This is not Oklahoma or Kansas, that was Clewiston. So not only did we have a lot of tornadoes, they were freaking big. Look at that thing. So, remember the last graphic I showed you was a few slides ago about the death percentage from Helene. Look at Milton. Granted, thankfully, the death toll was lower than Helene, but it was still 15. But the greatest killer was tornadoes. So the reason why I bring that up is every hurricane is different in the impacts that it can bring. Even me, I've been through countless hurricanes over the years. Every new hurricane that I come faced with, I wipe the slate clean and I give it the respect that it deserves. Because every hurricane is different. And if you have been through Ian and Irma and you name it, it's great that you guys have that experience, but we need to treat every new hurricane with a new respect, and that all the things that they could bring, it certainly can be different. Guess where this was? Not far away. This was several miles to our west. I remember this when I was watching Babcock Range Like a Hawk. So this was from our radar just down the street called Wink Live Doppler 3X, 3 times more commercials. As the storm, what happened here is, radar can do so many things. It can detect rain and wind, and what we're looking at here is why the Doppler is so darn good, everybody. So what this was a tornado touchdown in North Fort Myers. What you see right there, the red is rain. The technical term for it is called correlation coefficient. Obviously that's not very sexy for on air, so I call it tornado debris tracker. But what this is, the red is rain, the green and the blue, those are parts of people's homes. Those are tree limbs, it's stuff in the atmosphere. So what happened was, Tampa and Miami National Weather Service, their radars were so far away, they couldn't see that. So they actually, I found this out after the fact, they turned on to wing to see that image. So they knew that our Doppler was picking up on a tornado debris ball. So that's why we were able to give you as much of an early heads up as possible, and ironically, even ahead of the National Weather Service. So that is the tool that we provide for you guys. It's that radar that we have down the street, it's some of the specifics here. It's a $2 million C-band radar. It's called a dual polarization. It analyzes in the horizontal and the vertical. 600-mile range and diameter, can detect winds of 200. I have been asked the question at times about, can it impact our health, and is it safe, and all that. So the Doppler sits about 80 feet up, you can see it in that picture, and then it scans at a 0.5 degree angle, so when it sends out that pulse, it's above your heads. Okay, so it's analyzing what's up in the sky. So, and that was a question when we brought it to Babcock, and people were concerned about their health. All those pulses are above your heads. The retired names by year, we have now added Barrow, Helene, and Milton. Goodbye, good riddance. As you can imagine, Ian was a quick decision in 2022. So now that we've added Barrow, Helene, and Milton in pink, 99 storms have been retired since 1953. All right, here we go. If you are on this list, please be nice to us this year. This is the 2025 list of names. And in red, 6 years ago, and that's when these names get recycled. It's every 6 years. We had and you may recall this, a terrible Category 5 in the Bahamas. You remember that one? It slowed down, almost looked like it was going to go to Florida, and then it took a turn to the north. Well, Dorian was retired, replaced with Dexter for this year. Interesting if it goes to Miami, for those that are familiar with the show. So Andrea will kick it off. I tell you what though, guys, I do think, so there's a little area in the Bay of Campeche coming up, Southwest Gulf. There could be a little development. Even if that occurs and it becomes Andrea, it's going to go into Mexico. But if that doesn't occur, we actually could have our quietest start in at least over a decade. Now, great, but that does not dictate the rest of the season. Okay, because as we recall last year, remember it was pretty quiet in June and July, and then one storm surge event after another. Now, if we go through all of those names, heaven forbid, we then tap into what's called the supplemental or backup list of names. This used to be the Greek alphabet years ago, and they replaced it with the backup names. Full disclosure, and I'll just say it in plain English, if we go through all those names, I don't know what the hell's going to happen. So hopefully we don't find out. The peak of Everest is September 10th. We have, let's knock on wood again, we've never had a major hurricane outside of our big 3 months. So that's August, September, and October. For the northerners that are now living in South Florida, October's a big hurricane month. So there is the peak. During those 3 months, it's crunch time. Think of June and July, it's the appetizer. The main course is those 3 months. So that's our crunch time. September 10th is the peak, and no surprise, 1960, Donna made landfall in Collier County, and then Irma made landfall in Collier County on that same day, September 10th. Let's see, Colorado State actually just recently updated this. They kept the numbers the same, but Colorado State is expecting 17 named storms, 9 hurricanes, and 4 major hurricanes. Yes, we have experts in tropical weather and hurricanes in Colorado, go figure. Well, what's funny is I sometimes have viewers they'll immediately discredit their forecast like, no, they don't know what they're talking about. Well, the analogy I give is that, well, most astronauts don't live in space. Does that mean they know nothing about space? No, of course not. So the average is 14, 7, and 3. Last year we had 18, 11, and 5. Here's the Saffir-Simpson scale based off of wind. Category 1 is not a walk in the park, but certainly the lesser of the 2 evils between, let's say, Category 5. One of the biggest misconceptions with hurricane development is it's all about water temperatures. People will think that, well, all right, man, it's 90 degrees in the Gulf, that's not good, that's hurricane fuel, and it is, but it's not everything. I would even argue that if you have that Gulf at 150 degrees, hypothetically, and you have a lot of Saharan dust and a lot of wind shear, it does not matter what that water temperature is. A tropical system is going to struggle. So yes, water temperatures are a component to hurricane development, but it's not everything. You need to have, and this is what Ian had, what Hurricane Andrew had, you need to have all 4 of these elements to create a powerful hurricane. So the reason why Colorado State has the forecast that they do, they're expecting warmer than average water temperatures by the peak and a lack of El Nino. All right, so the thing about me is I'm an optimist. So let's be optimistic. This is a look at the current water temperatures. The orange and red is warmer than average, the blue is cooler than average. All right, let's start with the positive. This is significantly cooler than last year at this time. Last year was record warm, crazy warm. Believe it or not, that's below average, or at least cooler than average compared to last year. The problem is it's still above normal for the Gulf, the Caribbean, and a good chunk of the Atlantic, so the power is there. We are still in a neutral phase of what's called ENSO. Basically, it's La Nina and El Nino, and here's why that matters. So as we go into time, they are still expecting what's called a neutral phase. Now, if I had all the power in the world and I could control the weather, I would love us to be in an El Nino during hurricane season. Here's why. Warmer than normal water temperatures in the Eastern Pacific, which defines El Nino, increases wind shear in the tropical Atlantic. That wind shear hurts tropical systems. You have fewer storms and weaker storms as a result. La Nina, no offense to her, but we don't like her. La Nina is cooler than normal water temperatures in the Eastern Pacific that lowers wind shear in the Atlantic, and you oftentimes will get stronger storms and more storms. And no shocker here, that's why the past several years, which have been active, we've had a lot of La Nina episodes. So here's a vertical diagram of wind shear. When you have a powerful hurricane, you have low wind shear, you have the storm breathing, better vertical alignment. In a high wind shear environment, those are basically winds stronger up in the atmosphere. It causes systems to tip over, and they're likely to be either weaker, disorganized, or completely ripped apart. All right, before you freak out, let me explain it. So normally on TV, I get about 3 minutes, and then my producer in my ear is like, all right, wrap it up, Matt. So now that you all have been kind enough to come, we can talk about it in greater length. So Colorado State also issues what's called a strike probability. So before we freak out, let's explain it, and I'll put things into perspective. So Colorado State is saying that there's a 92% chance that Florida will get hit this year, which is a 6% increase. Look at the banner. The banner says a named storm. Guess what a named storm is? Could be a tropical storm. And also Florida has 1,300 miles of coastline. So if you have a tropical storm that makes landfall in, let's say, Destin or Pensacola, that would verify, and you guys would barely even have an additional breeze. So, that could technically come into South Florida, but let's be optimistic. Now, they also do metrics for hurricanes. There's a 65% chance, that's a 9% increase. And then lastly, there's a 35% chance for a major hurricane, and that's a 6% increase. Also, on a positive note, that means, guys, we have a 65% chance that we don't get hit by a major hurricane. So, but we still need to prepare for the 35. All right, so I am actually not a huge fan of the Colorado State numbers, and here's the reason why. It's not about the numbers, it's about the impact. You know, you can have a season with 5, 10, or 100 storms. Doesn't matter, it's all about impact. Classic example, we're gonna take you back to 1992. That was the season with Andrew. Andrew, in that season, 7 storms, only 7, and there was 1 major hurricane. The major hurricane was Andrew that completely changed southern Florida and how the entire state handles hurricanes. Also, for a show of hands, who was here during Ian? All right, say out loud here, what if I told you that Ian was during an average year, average in terms of number of storms, 14, and there were only 2 major hurricanes? All right, and let's say it out loud. For those who were here during Ian, did it feel like an average year for us? No. So at the end of the day, impact, not about the number of storms. And you can even play on the flip side. In 2010, we had 19 storms, most of them curved out to sea. That's in the books as above average, but the United States barely even noticed the thing. So it's not always about the numbers. So what I've done is, over the years, you guys have asked great questions. So now I'm trying to incorporate them into the PowerPoint. So I get asked this a lot. What is the difference between the American model and the European model? So what they are, supercomputers. There's the American model on the left from College Park, Maryland, and then you have the European model, no surprise, in England. So why is it that when I watch Wing and watch the tropical weather coverage, I see all these noodles and the spaghetti plots going in different directions? Well, what happens is those supercomputers are in different countries with different funding, different equipment, different quality and quantity of initial conditions and how they're analyzing the atmosphere, different resolution, different algorithms, different equations. So no surprise, you're gonna get a different output. So my job and what I do is I look at that range and possibilities and I make my best educated prediction for what's gonna happen. And the National Hurricane Center does the same thing. Like for example, if you have a model showing this, or showing this, you probably would want to pick something near the middle, unless you feel really confident about what you think. Now, if I had to pick between the two, I would say that the European model does get the edge. Now, the European model is not always right. It's like a B+ student, and that B+ student gets a lot of A's, and that student can also, though, get C's, D's, and F's. So it's just that the European model overall is a little more accurate. Saharan dust, we've been seeing rounds of that already, is it's not something new. It's been happening for as long as the Earth has been created. It's just that in recent years, we can see it. We have the technology to see it. And then we also have the technology to forecast it. In 1990, we didn't have that. Now we do, and that's why you've been hearing more about it over the years. So the dust is at about 5,000 to 15,000 feet, carried by the trade winds. Our big Saharan dust months are now July and all the way into August. So now your risk of water and wind, consider your threats. Thankfully, most of Babcock Ranch is around 30 feet elevation. Two things to note: Ian, which was our highest surge in 15 years, or 200 years, sorry about that. 15 feet of surge, greatest in 200 years. Even if you doubled Ian's surge, we would still be in good shape. So you guys are in a wonderful location. So you don't have to worry about surge. Now it's interesting. You go down 31 towards the Civic Center, different story. And I actually recall even last year, there was some surge that made it all the way to the Civic Center during Helene and Milton. So I would say for Babcock Ranch, there's the big three. Our biggest dynamics are going to be freshwater flooding, strong wind, and tornadoes. Now, we did notice with Ian, and it's not possible, there is such a thing as lake surge. So those big man-made lakes, you're not going to get 15 feet of surge like Fort Myers Beach, but wind is a force, and it's just forcing that water towards a certain part of the lake. So if you do live along a large man-made lake, Lake Babcock, that is where lake surge is not impossible. Again, you're not going to get huge crashing waves like Fort Myers Beach, but it's just something to factor in. Okay, determine if you live in a flood-prone area. We do. Find out if you live in an evacuation zone. We technically do, but you don't have to worry about it. Identify your home structure risk. And the one thing that I will say, and this is super important, is that, let's stop on that. Another big misconception with hurricanes is that, we have to evacuate to Miami, Orlando, and Tampa, and so on and so forth. Babcock does not have to evacuate. And I actually urge against evacuating, and there are multiple reasons why. First off, our building code, our equipment that was used in our homes, we did very well during Ian. We never lost power, we had clean water. It was so good, I actually had our weather team stay at my home during and after Ian. So the reason why I bring that up is I don't want us to clog the roads for those that truly do have to leave. When you evacuate, it's not because of the inconvenience of a hurricane, it's to save your life from rising water. And Fort Myers Beach and Sanibel, they truly do need to leave. And what you could do is, I'm real big on the theme of neighbors helping neighbors. If you know someone on Fort Myers Beach or Sanibel or who's vulnerable to water rise, have them stay at your place and let's help them out. And that way they don't have to go through the pain of, can I find a hotel or a hotel that is able to take dogs? And it's so stressful. So let's see if we can help them out. Here's a look at Southwest Florida evacuation zones, and I would love to say that you can see this in our Wing Hurricane Guide, which is at Publix, but Publix has decided they didn't want to do that anymore. Yeah, I made a fuss of it on social media about it. I got in trouble for that. Oh, I got written up and everything. Oh yeah. My boss was like, "Don't do that again." But I was pissed. It's like, come on. So instead, the reason why they didn't want to do it is they were like, we have a guide of our own. I looked at their guide, it's 4 pages long. So, long story short, Publix doesn't carry the guides anymore. We are going to be spreading the wealth in the years ahead, and if you are looking for one, it's at the brand new Ace Hardware. So it's at the front door. So you can grab it, it's free, nothing's different. The only thing that's different is the location. We have a lot of good information in there, including the evacuation zones, okay? All right, that's my piece about Publix. I still love them, it's just like, come on guys, why are you not covering the guides? Here's how the storm surge evacuation zones work. Let's say you have a surge of 15 feet, and if you live in zone A, in this hypothetical example, the elevation is 5 feet. That leaves you with, you deduct that elevation off of the surge forecast at 10 feet above ground level. So then as you go up to zone B with a higher elevation, 10 feet, and that leaves you with 5 feet of water, AGL, or above ground level, so on and so forth. And that's why with Hurricane Ian, we did not have any issues with surge, because we were so high up. All right, we're almost at the end of the PowerPoint. Prepare before hurricane season. You guys are already doing that, as we are going to assemble a disaster supply kit, food, water, batteries, charger, radio, cash, like FP&L had said. Get an insurance checkup and document your possessions. Create a communication plan and a handwritten list of contacts, and strengthen your home. Get moving when a storm threatens. Protect your home, cover windows, secure doors, and loose items. We had a lot of ladder accidents during Ian, Helene, and Milton with people putting up shutters. Be safe, both putting up and taking down. Determine sheltering options and consider your pets. One of the things that you could do, and it has been done before, you take a kiddie pool. You can buy a kiddie pool from God knows where, and you take pieces of sod. You put sod in the kiddie pool. You put the kiddie pool in the garage, and that's where Fido can do their business in the garage during a hurricane. Okay, put them outside during with 100-mile-an-hour winds. I don't think they're going to be a huge fan. I get asked this question a lot. When should I put up the hurricane shutters? And I have 2 answers to that. A, you can drive by my home on, no, I'm just kidding. I literally have people who I'll see them driving by my home and, are the shutters up? Did he put the shutters up? No, the true story is I'm stuck in the office so much that I sometimes don't even have time to put up my own shutters. And then what's awesome is you guys will actually come around and help me, which is, thank you so much. It's very kind. But when I recommend putting up the hurricane shutters, you can do it if it brings you peace of mind. You can do it during a tropical storm warning, hurricane warning, but when I personally recommend it, because it's kind of a pain in the butt, it's a lot of work. So I recommend it when we are under a hurricane watch. So the best way to think about it, hurricane watch, put up the hurricane shutters. Tropical storm warning, wind engineering studies have been done that the possibility of flying projectiles that are launched at your window, the chances are a lot lower. So hurricane watch, put up the hurricane shutters. If you've evacuated, only return home when told to do so. I'm going to skip down to this one right here. If you're using a generator, make sure that it is 20 feet from your house. Now that also means not 20 feet from your house and 5 feet from your neighbor's house. I don't think you're going to get a Christmas card after that. So keep it away from both homes and prepare for the likelihood that we could be without power or communication for days, if not weeks. I think Babcock's going to be on it, so I'd be shocked if it's that long. But nowadays, there's so many social media apps. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, and the list goes on. All right, my promise every single year is when it comes to hurricanes, I'm a no BS, no hype type of guy. I like to get you the information as it comes in. And that was my promise during Irma, during Ian, during Helene, during Milton. And I'll finish with this. If the sleeves are rolled up and the red tie is out, that's not a good thing. All right, thank you so much, everybody. And now I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
So like we've done in years past, I want to allow you to ask your question, but I also want you to ask in the mic so everybody in the room can hear it, so we don't have to repeat it. So we'll just start on this side of the room and we'll work our way to the right. So any questions here first? Okay.
Where is the official rainfall measurement done for this area?
That's a good question. We actually don't have an official. I'm working on it. Normally, the official rainfall data is going to be at your airport. So Punta Gorda Airport, RSW, Pagefield, Naples, those are the official recognized by the National Weather Service. Unofficially, you guys, some in this community have actually put up home stations that can be through a website called Weather Underground. And there are stations in Babcock that I actually look at to get weather data. There also is another, and I get asked this question a lot, is, Matt, I love weather. What weather station should I get? There's a company called Tempest. Tempest it uses solar power that we don't have to go out and charge it. Does a great job. I have one in my backyard. It's about $300. Great information, but I use that data as well. So to answer your question, the official data is actually from us. So we as a community, because we have nothing that the Weather Service recognizes as in the books and all that, believe it or not, I use what you all contribute to put on TV what Babcock is experiencing. So I have to say thank you for that, because your contribution is what I put on TV, because we don't have official numbers here at Babcock. So thank you for that.
Good question.
We have a Wink app on our phone, and the alarms continue to go off, like rain in your area, heavy rain. Where's that actually coming from? Because lots of times it's not even close to us.
And it's, you hear my voice, right? Kind of freaky. I even turned down my own voice too. Shut up, man, shut up. And you're in terms of like lightning and stuff like that. Yeah, so it probably sets up a radius. You might even be able to change that in your phone, where it knows based off of the lightning data where it is. It calculates where you are via GPS, and it knows how far that lightning is. And then there's a trigger that sets off and it alerts you.
So there's a setting on there that we can possibly adjust that.
You can, yeah. And then also, same thing with like a severe thunderstorm warning.
Right.
Oftentimes the Weather Service, what they do is when they issue a warning, it comes in the form of what's called a polygon. The polygon is bigger oftentimes than the threat area, but what you'll find is that the Weather Service wants to over-prepare you than under-prepare you, and you may be technically under a severe thunderstorm warning, but you may not even see anything because they overestimate, or you could get hit with that severe thunderstorm. So oftentimes it's based off of your GPS location, and if you're getting too many alerts, that can be adjusted. Yeah.
Thank you.
If we have high-impact windows and glass doors, what do the shutters, why do we need?
You don't need them.
Okay.
Yeah. It's either one or the other. Yeah, the shutters are for people who don't have those, and oftentimes those windows are prorated for 120, 140, and sometimes if they're really good, Cat 5, 160. Yeah.
You want on this one?
Thanks, Rob. Just to follow on that radius of when your voice comes out versus our horns, I think there's a 1 mile difference. I was in Founders, I heard your voice warning about lightning before the horns.
There was lightning in there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think those have a 10-mile radius on them.
So listen for Matt's voice, Matt.
How do we think AI is going to affect hurricane forecasting?
Ooh, good question. Good question. I actually did extensive homework on that 2 nights ago because Google has just released a weather AI model. And you talk about coming out with a bang. So they released this AI model, and talk about bold statement. They right out of the gate said, we're better than the European model, and our models are better than NOAA. So, oh yeah, so Google's going bold. So they have created an AI model, and they have basically, long story short, they tested this model out during the 2023 and 2024 hurricane season, and they said it was better than the Euro and better than NOAA. So we will be using that model this hurricane season in the arsenal. In a nutshell, there are 2 types of models. There is the traditional model that we've been seeing for years, that we're accustomed to, and what that does is it analyzes the physics of the atmosphere. It uses equations and calculus to determine what's going to happen. AI models don't do that. AI models take decades and decades of weather patterns, analyze those weather patterns for similarities to create a weather forecast. So it's different. Early research has been done that the AI models are doing pretty darn good. It's not like 50% better, but most of the percentages have been that it's 5 to 10% better. But if it's 5 to 10% better, hey, I'll take it. If it leads to a more accurate forecast, I'm all for it. But man, isn't it amazing? Nowadays, it's like AI everything. And with what it has done for weather forecasting, so far it's been positive. I'll take it.
Another question.
Great question.
My question is more about the sirens here in Babcock. Like 3 days ago, we had terrible lightning for a couple of days. And then the next day, we didn't have any lightning. But the sirens are going off on the 3rd day, but we didn't hear anything like on the first 2 days. So how are they set off, or how do they operate?
Yeah, so they're I can answer this one. So they're in a 10-mile radius, and you're hearing them more now because we have more. We don't just have the one in Founders Square anymore. We've got them along the Parkway. We've got them here out at the school. We've got them over here by the sports field. So there's more to warn you when that's coming. So that's probably why you're hearing them more.
Okay.
Just know that they're not tornado warnings. They're for the lightning specifically. Yep, they're just for the lightning.
Okay.
And Florida does not have tornado sirens. And there are a couple things like why that is. Tornado sirens are expensive. They were used over the decades primarily in states where you have long track, powerful tornadoes that you need the sirens to be alerted. Nowadays, we really don't need that because this is our best notification system. You know, it's not a good way to be alerted to just hearing something. You want to be able to see it, and that's what the phone can do. The phone can, not only you can hear that alert, but you can see where the warning is and where it's going towards. And basically our local government, what I was told was that they don't want to make the investment in our short-lived and oftentimes weak tornadoes, Milton was the exception, because we all have a free notification system on our phone instead of making the investment in a $50,000 tornado siren. So again, I'm just the messenger, but that is what they told me for why they don't do it.
Another question?
Yeah, you mentioned the NOAA, the cuts that are occurring. How is that going to affect your job?
The NOAA cuts?
Yeah, and going forward.
You know, I apologize that, I'm sorry guys, I wish I had something prepared about that. Oh, there it is. It's almost like I knew that question was coming. That's so interesting. All right, let's talk about it. And first up, fun fact about me, I hate politics. I hate it. It brings out the worst in people. It gets so nasty. I don't care if you're red, blue, black, white, or orange. I don't care. So, with that said, I tried to think about how I was going to address this. And my wife and I do not live a very political life. We try to stay out of it. So, I'm going to try to do this in a way where it's fair to both sides. And I feel like by doing that, what I'll say is that I'll address what has happened so far. So that way it's based on fact, okay? So over 800 people were fired, including 200 from the National Weather Service. Recently, they have rehired back 150, okay? Some of those fired included researchers working on better models, a quarter of the staff that puts data into models, those improving hurricane forecasting, the lead meteorologist at 16 National Weather Service offices. I think it was kind of interesting timing that the head of the National Weather Service in Tampa Bay, he recently retired. Interesting timing. Members of the hurricane hunters, but not all of them. And the hurricane hunters are going to still fly this hurricane season. I actually just talked to the Hurricane Center last week. It was a very cool call. It was with me, Allison Ray, Rob Duns. We all got together and we talked to the National Hurricane Center. And we said, hey, are we going to see any big changes? And they promised us that we won't. You know, it's not like they're not going to have enough money to fly out the missions, but that doesn't mean that there won't be some changes. Just last night, we put a story on Wink that we used to put out these sail drones into hurricanes, that these sail drones would go into parts of the hurricane that we couldn't safely get to. Well, they weren't given a contract or something happened, and so that no longer is there as an option. The reason why I bring that up is one of those sail drones actually recorded one of the highest wind speeds offshore with Helene last year. So we're going to miss some of that data. You know, it's not the end of the world, but we're going to miss some of that data. So, in theory, forecasts now run a greater risk of being less accurate, less reliable, more mistakes, setbacks and slower progress, making improvements on current weather models. Weather balloon launches have been suspended in Alaska, Nebraska, South Dakota. You have less data. Statistically, I think it's like 10 to 20% less upper air data. The National Weather Service, for a time, stopped translating life-saving alerts to languages other than English. They have reversed that decision. So now it's going to be for multiple languages. And that's how it was before. Please note that this next graphic has not happened yet. These are proposed ideas. Proposed 75% budget cut to oceanic and atmospheric climate research, nearly 50% cut to NASA offices, which include Earth satellite technology, the GOES satellite, nearly 50% cut to National Ocean Service, which manages billions of US fishery dollars, and NOAA's overall budget for 2026 is about 6 to 7 billion, and they would like to trim that by 25%. All right, my analogy that I will oftentimes give is you have a baseball field on the left with all the players. After the NOAA cuts, we are going to take off the shortstop and the center fielder. Now, can you still win the game without the center fielder and the shortstop? Yes, you can. It's just harder. And that's what the National Weather Service, I talked to them just last week, and here's what they told me to tell you. They've been very private about the matter, but their job, yes, is harder now, but it doesn't change their mission. Their mission is to save your life, get you the information, and that won't change. It's just that things are harder for them now. But that doesn't change our promise and our commitment, just like me. I personally, I have noticed very small, and to answer your question, small and minor things like products either late or not sent out, but nothing that impacts your safety and you getting that information. We'll have to see this hurricane season, how it goes. I'd be lying if I said I know what's going to happen. I don't. I'm going to kind of go with the flow. Maybe everything's fine. Maybe there's some changes, but no matter what, I will work as hard as I can to get you what you need. So it doesn't matter what's happening at the federal level, I will get you the information that you need. And so will the hardworking staff at the National Weather Service. God, I hope that I answered that correctly. Was that okay? Was that fair?
That's great.
All right.
Perfect. Any other questions here in this room?
Question.
This group? Any other raised hands of a second time around? Yeah, right here. Yes.
The sirens that they're mentioning, I've never heard them unless they sound like ambulance sirens, because sometimes I hear that, I'm like, wow, that storm could cause some.
Yeah, no, I mean, they go 3 times, and it'll probably last for 10 or 15 seconds each one. And they're in Founder Square, they're here over the sports fields, but they are going off. We're hearing them for sure.
Honestly, I would was it June 14th? We're probably gonna have those ticking for at least the next 3 months. You're gonna hear a lot.
I
Yeah.
have a question about the impact sliders. I'm on a 3rd floor condo, and I have a cat door installed in my sliders. Last year, when we had Milton, I can put a sealer in the cat door. But what happened was because the 2 sliders are not locking, I had wind coming through between them. So I shoved towels and so on in that space. I'm wondering, is it best to remove the cat door from the sliders when we have a hurricane warning so that my sliders can lock?
Yeah, they got a lot. Yeah. You would agree, right?
Yeah, definitely, they've got a lot, yeah.
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 The goal is to make sure that.
Correct.
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely. We have one more question back here.
Okay, the water, the lakes and everything that they're creating here in that park. What about when we have the wind and the hurricanes? Where's all that water?
So in terms of like the
You're talking about Lake Babcock?
Yeah,
All the lakes
all
around?
the
Okay.
lakes, all the-
I can help
Right,
answer
talk
some
about
of
the
this, yeah.
regulating of-
Yes, because, so, living here at Babcock, and some might have heard this, but we've got some really smart lakes, we've got some really smart systems. The lakes are all interconnected, they are controlled, we can control the heights in certain lakes, and as they continue to build more out to the east, they're adding those systems. There's actually engineers involved that watch those levels, especially as we get into rainy season. So as you can see, all the lakes are really down right now. Some of the construction areas, they're even further down, right? That's normal and natural during construction. But as the rain starts to hit, some of those areas start to fill. We want those lakes to fill up. Obviously, they look nice, right? We've got all the littorals, we've got everything in place to make sure that we avoid any washout, potentially just from a normal storm. But we do have engineers and even contractors that are watching that for us every day, and especially when hurricanes are starting to potentially hit the area, or if we have warnings in our area. So we are watching that. I'm watching that with the Kitson team and the development team. And like I said, we are very lucky, we're very fortunate. The way the roads and everything were designed here is that those lakes are gonna fill up first, and then what's gonna happen next? The roadways. And then the houses are meant to be at a level above that. So you're gonna see at times, especially during heavy, heavy storms, where those roads are gonna fill up. And you're gonna see from us, I know there's been some questions on mulch, you're gonna see some changes when it comes to mulch in the verges and when those can be placed. And that's up to some of the sub-associations. Matt's already aware, I'm already aware that in some of the service areas, we've already eliminated putting mulch in before the rainy season. And we can only place it during November through February, and it has to be a brown and wire mulch. We've gone away from the pine straw because it just mats up, and then we have some major issues. So,
And he's gonna be too humble to say this, but man, our community did so good during Ian. We got national recognition for just we never lost power. We were in the eyeball of Ian, and we never lost power. We had clean water, something that a lot of communities couldn't say. So you guys are in a really good spot.
Yeah.
Really good spot.
yeah, we're very fortunate. And a couple comments that I want to make just to wrap things up here is, as you all know, this turns into a shelter, right? We had about 4.5 hours before the state came in, before Milton hit, to prepare the field house. And we were hoping to block them off from a few of the rooms in this space, but they just kept coming and pushing and saying, the building's ours, which is natural, right? But we were trying to obviously be very mindful of the fact of school had to open up in a few weeks. We wanted to make sure that the kids could get back to school. But you know, we opened the doors, it was just over 3 weeks, the shelter was open, and then it had closed down. But as you also saw, some of the shelters in Charlotte County were starting to get into that B zone, C zone, and they were all coming here, and they were just lining the streets, which is great, right? That's what we're here for. They actually opened up both schools, and even the new school, they're talking about turning that into a backup shelter as well. So it's great news. So you're gonna see more of that, which I think is amazing. Again, just be mindful. We've got a huge area to cover, especially with all the parks and the sports fields and everything at the amenities. So us starting to shut down some of the amenities in advance, I've got a team of almost 100, but we can't get to everything. So that's why sometimes you're gonna see 48 hours, maybe even a little bit longer. We're gonna start shutting down some of the amenities. We're gonna try to keep the pools open as long as we can in case, as he said, it doesn't hit us. It's 20 miles to the north, and we can get that pool open quickly. But we have to start moving furniture. We have to start taking care of that. But my team, literally the day before Milton, came and we shut down both lodges, and we had all the parks and everything ready to go within a matter of about 36 hours. So we were rocking and rolling, and then, as you know, we got everything back up and running within a few short days, minus the field house here. So just keep that in mind. As you know, if you haven't signed up already, if you're getting our communications, I know we communicate a lot. During the storm, we communicate even more. Civic Ready is a backup platform. Our communications that we send out on the Saturdays, like we've got one this morning, that goes to everyone, including, you know, people who live up in northern Wisconsin or live outside of the state. It's going to everyone, but Civic Ready is specific for Babcock, and it's the emergency line for Babcock. So make sure you've signed up for that as well. It's an additional resource in a communication center. So I think that pretty much answered all the questions. I want to thank Matt again and the sponsors for coming out today. If you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out. The HOA team, my team, is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We're in the offices downtown, as you can see. Everything in B Street starting to push out. We're losing all of our parking. We're eventually going to be moving across from the fire station early next year. So as they continue to build out B Street, but I just want to let you know, my team's always available, even after hours. That's why we've got the community patrol to assist with anything. So thank you guys again. Have a great rest of your Saturday.
Let's have a quiet hurricane season.
I agree. Thank you.